Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Anti-Alienation Project. I hope everybody's doing good. Go ahead and leave in the comments in the live chat where you're coming from in the world, how you're doing. If you've been following this case already, I have to admit I've been quite interested and captivated by the Lori Vallow case for a couple years now, especially because I live in the area around the area where these crimes took place. So tonight I thought I would do a little bit of a different type of live chat. Usually I just get on here and talk and answer questions about my own life and my own thoughts and perspectives. Tonight I'm going to try to use this software I have that I have not tried out yet, so bear with me, please. I'm going to try to use this software to break down Colby Ryan's video about his mom and his sister's relationship. If you're unfamiliar, convicted murderer Lori Vallow had three children, Tylee Ryan, Colby Ryan, and JJ Vallow. She was convicted of murdering her two younger children, 7-year-old JJ, and I believe she was 14 or 15-year-old Tylee. However, there is a surviving child who is named Colby. Colby Ryan has his own YouTube channel, and guess what been watching a little bit of? That's Colby Ryan's YouTube channel. So shout out to you, Colby. I would I would definitely encourage anybody who's interested in this case or interested in the psychology in the first place to check out Colby Ryan's YouTube channel. He has a lot of interesting perspectives and insights to offer about his mom and his sister and this horrible tragedies. Well, I won't say tragedy because Lori's been saying tragedy. I'll say abomination. That's a better word to describe what she did. So I'm coming at this from a very particular perspective. If you're unaware, here on this little corner of the internet, I talk about something called parental alienation. What is parental alienation, you might wonder? Well, this is a form of child psychological abuse. It often happens in the middle of a custody dispute or a divorce, but not always. It can happen in intact households. What does this involve? Well, it really involves an angry, spiteful parent who manipulates their child to reject their other parent. And this rejection can cause a lifetime of really negative self-destructive effects in the child. It sends the child in a downward spiral. And this abuse can sometimes cause a healthy, loving parent-child relationship to completely sever for years, for decades, or even a lifetime. So I learned the truth that I've been living in a fabricated reality created by my mom for 20 years. I learned the truth 3 years ago. Since then, I've been on a journey to rebuild my relationship with my dad. So ever since I first started looking into this case, I noticed a lot of signs of parental alienation, specifically with Lori's daughter, Tylee. I noticed there were a lot of false allegations being made by Lori, which is a surefire sign of someone with a pathology. Now, 95% of people who alienate their children have personality disorders, specifically narcissistic personality disorder and or borderline personality disorder. We know this from the research of Dr. Harmon at Colorado State University. So not only have I noticed the alienation that Lori achieved with her daughter, Tylee, I also noticed that there is possible alienation with Colby as well. And then not only that, but with the religious fanaticism, you have several other different things going on. In my opinion, Lori created a fabricated reality that she made from her own delusions, and she forced her children to live in this false reality. And so, as I'm watching Colby Ryan's really honest and heartfelt, genuine videos, I find myself relating to so much of what he has to say. My mom, too, she didn't murder anyone, and it was not as severe of a case. I think Lori Vallow is like the most severe end of the spectrum, but my mom certainly had the religious fanaticism, and a whole bunch of other tactics that I noticed Lori Daybell, perpetrating, especially on our children, which is really sad. So please leave any questions or comments in the chat, like I mentioned earlier. And I'm going to go ahead and get into the video. If you've been following this case, let me know. So I have not done this before, like I said, but I'm going to do my best to connect us to the video. Sorry, guys. Bear with me for a second, please. Okay, share. So I'm going to try to share the screen. We're going to try to do it like this. Okay, here we go. Hopefully this will work. Let me know how the audio is too, okay? And we'll make sure that we try to work this, get it playing.
Here we go. What are we doing tonight? Oh, I got the chain tucked in up there. Yeah, we got the bun going on tonight. That versatility and never dying. That's why you got long hair, huh? All right. First of all, good to see you guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was struggling today.
Oops. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit,
You know,
try to
all
get
the
to
things
the
we
meat.
want to talk about a lot of different things, and this one is it's really on my mind now. Reading through these documents that we're gonna pull up. I'm gonna pull my phone up too, but reading through it and seeing what it says, it shows me a lot, and it just really made me think more of a deeper level of what people don't understand about Kylie and what people don't understand about my mom. So I'm gonna pull this up real quick. Okay, so you guys won't see this, what I'm looking at real quick, but I'm gonna pull up the actual documents for you guys real quick. Good.
I think he's referring to the court documents.
See you guys. I'm happy you're here. Obviously progressing the way that we have been. I've loved where we've been at. I've loved talking.
He does long
I'm
intros.
tired of people not knowing just kind of what the reality was between the relationship of my mom and Kylie. So
That's so important to point out that the abusive parent in this case is often very aware of how others perceive them and their relationships, especially the relationships with their children. So I think it's pretty common for the actual parent-child relationship. We're talking the meat of what honestly goes on behind closed doors in that parent-child relationship will often be very different from what others on the outside perceive about that relationship.
let's pull these documents up. We'll talk about them and we'll get into it. So hope you guys can see that. It's good to see you guys. If you haven't seen these files, basically, they're filed by Maricopa, obviously, and basically what the prosecution is saying that they want to prevent the defense from introducing any statements made by Tyler. So I'm not exactly sure.
So I'm going to skip ahead from the court documents and just go to his honest take on their relationship, knowing that he probably has more insight than literally any other human on earth, given that he was the closest person to Tylee and his mom.
I wanted to bring this up because one of the things I've had to come to accept in my life was how much my mom cared in general. She was obviously off the rail at this point, but she obviously, and this is obviously fact, but she did not care about Tyler at all. And even the action of sending Tyler in there following that horrible situation, knowing what you planned on doing and having happen, and then knowing where Tylee's at, and I'm going to use her to go get my purse or do anything, have her be a part of this whole situation. She put Tylee in this position. Now, this goes back to the beginning. This goes back to the beginning of what I'm having to realize. She put Tylee in.
So if you haven't watched my first video on this whole case, I pointed out in that video how she seems to treat Tylee and her son JJ very differently. For instance, at one point, she sends her son JJ to go live with her um, partner, who she's in the process of separating from, for I believe it's 30 days straight. And she just drops him off like she doesn't care. She just leaves him there. And on the other hand, with Ty Lee, she's made Ty Lee believe tons of things, negative things about Charles, her stepdad, so much so that they had to go to family therapy. And she apparently hated him. In her own testimony, she claimed that she would keep a bat, a baseball bat, beside her bed to protect herself from her stepdad. The alienation had gotten that far. Um, and, you know, if anybody knows my story, not to talk about myself too much, it's just constantly on my mind, my own lived experience, because I notice all these signs. I was the only child alienated in my family. This is actually not too uncommon for these abusive parents to target one child and to manipulate one child to reject their other parent while allowing the other children in the family to maintain close and happy, healthy relationships with the parent. And for a while, I've been wondering why. Why did my mom target me? Not like a why me, oh, woe is me type of thing. Not like that. More like just really itching my head like, is it my gender? Is it because I'm the only girl in my family? Is it because I was the oldest? Like, why did she target me? And what I've come to learn through a lot of research and talking to experts and psychologists is that these parents tend to find the child who is the most outspoken, who fights back, who questions things, who is an independent thinker. They find that child who's a little bit of a threat to them, and they target that child. Why do they do this? One word: control. They need to control that child. So the main way they're able to do this and control that child is by removing that relationship with the other parent, is by isolating them. That's exactly why my mom targeted me, because I was always the child who fought back, who questioned her, who brought things up to her attention that I wasn't okay with, who spoke back, who was fighting. Our relationship, it was difficult, it was contentious, it was not ever a good mother-daughter relationship. And that's because I'm stubborn. Stubborn. Sorry. I'm stubborn. That's because I'm strong-willed, and that threatened her. And that is my true belief, that she targeted me in order to control me. So, knowing that myself, I do wonder if Lori targeted her daughter Ty Lee while allowing her other sons to have loving relationships with the men and the fathers in their lives, because there was something about Ty Lee that threatened Lori, something about Ty Lee's spirit. Maybe she was stubborn too. Maybe she was strong-willed too. Maybe she fought back. Maybe she questioned her mom. And maybe that threatened Lori. So Lori needed to isolate her from her father, from her stepfather, in order to control her. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. However, if Colby, if you somehow, I know that this probably will never happen, like a needle in a haystack. If you happen to come across my video, though, I would love to either interview and or talk to you and help make sense of the situation, because I think that's why if in families when one sibling is targeted, it's about controlling the child who's threatening the system.
Here, unfortunately, it puts us in a position of this. My mom, throughout Tylee's life, always backburnered Tylee. She always pushed Tylee off. And the relationship was Tylee chasing my mom's love,
Oh,
Tylee desperately wanting her attention, wanting her acceptance, wanting her. And my mom, I don't know if how smart she really is at the end of the day. I don't know if Lori knew that that was the case, if she had the position of power where she knew that Tylee needed this and needed that connection and wanted that, and so she took advantage of that.
So yes, I would venture to say probably. She probably exploited what she saw as her daughter's des desperation to have love and acceptance, as any teenage daughter would.
Or she had disdain for her and was mad at her because she did need extra attention.
That's another thing about these parents. So a lot of the times these parents, and I know that Lori has been, some people have mentioned Munchausen by proxy, which is another fabricated reality imposed on the child. Um, and if you do watch the police camera cams and the body cams, you will hear Lori talk about Tylee like she's a child, like the medicine's in the house and Tylee can't live without her medicine. Tylee's had such a hard life since age 3. She's had all these medical problems and I've always been by her side. I've been there day and night. Like, excuse me, Lori, what parent wouldn't be? That doesn't make you some wonderful parent. That makes you a parent. Excuse me, I just get kind of annoyed by all of that. But my point is, there is a possibility because we know that these pathological parents like to have their children dependent on them. There is a possibility that in various ways, Lori Daybell made her daughter Tylee dependent on her. And because these parents are so delusional and they have a lack of self-awareness, there's a possibility that she resented Tylee for this dependence. So that's what these parents do. I've seen this again and again with my own parent. They make the child dependent on them and then they resent the child for being dependent on them. They create a problem in the child's life, whatever it may be, and they blame the child for that problem. That's what they do with everything.
The reason I'm bringing this up because this goes deeper into the relationship, and that one incident and what's happening right now is bringing up the whole fact that Tylee had to be a part of this first before she had her life taken. Before she had to meet a horrible end to her life, she had to go through this trauma. And my mind always breaks these things down. What was going on before that? Was there conversations? Did Tylee have any, did know anything that was going on? She even know that Charles was coming to the house. Did she have any idea what was going to happen? And then I remember that moment when I walked up to that house and I knocked on that door and Tylee opened it and she looked like she had been oh my gosh, hold up. She looked like she had been.
I feel so bad for him.
She looked like she had been holding it in. Just hold.
There's one thing I want to talk about. I've been watching the trial and the trial recaps going on right now with Lori Daybell's trial about her husband, Charles Vallow's death/murder, alleged murder. I've noticed that she's now trying to throw her daughter Tylee under the bus. Not only has she blamed Tylee for JJ's death in an interview on Colby Ryan's channel. Yes, you heard me right. If you haven't seen it, you should go watch it. Colby Ryan filmed an interview with his mom, on a phone interview because she was in jail. And his mom, Lori Vallow, claimed, it's so sick. She claims that there was never any murders, that Tylee accidentally killed JJ and then Tylee took her own life. That's what she claims. So she's putting all of these horrific acts that she did onto her daughter. And if you don't come from a narcissistic and or dysfunctional toxic family, you might not be familiar with the term scapegoat, but that is classic scapegoating. And you see this too in the most recent trial, evidence of Lori scapegoating her daughter, Tylee. So I wonder, when did Lori decide to place Tylee in that role? When did she decide to start scapegoating her daughter? And my gut instinct from everything that I've seen and heard and read, um, is that this isn't something that magically occurred after Tylee's death. I imagine Tylee had been in that role for a long time.
in the back all day. And she just collapsed into me, bro. Like she's a lot shorter than me. And she just fell into my stomach. And I remember just holding her for a second. And I was just so like baffled at the situation because at that moment I still didn't even know what happened to Charles. I had no idea. I'm walking into the situation thinking that she had to watch Charles have a heart attack. And so that's my knowledge walking in. And then I can even know the gravity of what was happening when she fell into me. I know.
Wow, that's a unique perspective because I watched the whole police interview with Tylee, and you can see that on the part one in my channel. I recently made a video analyzing that, and you hear Tylee speak with her own words. She seems very, very put together. She doesn't seem extremely anxious or upset whatsoever. And that is directly after her stepdad had been shot and killed by her uncle. She seems collected. She seems calm. She seems okay. But then to hear from Colby this moment where Tylee collapses into him, and it's evident that this has all been weighing on her so heavily, that tells us that she was wearing a mask that day in the police interrogation, which I suspected, but it just further confirms she was holding it all in. She was holding it all together, likely for her mother. So, so far, what I'm hearing is that Tylee craved her mother's love and acceptance. She perhaps was a people pleaser. At the same time, it seems like Lori may have resented her daughter. There's also evidence of scapegoating. It's painting a very sad picture and a picture I know personally all too well.
And I just remember after the conversation with my mom, and after she tells me what happens, my mind goes blank. My heart drops through my stomach, and there is absolutely no care. And Tylee sees this. Tylee's watching Alex. She's watching my mom right after this situation, and they don't care at all.
Mm.
They're completely like shrugged off, like, oops. Like they don't care. I can't imagine what it would be like to be a 16-year-old and feel that way. And it always brings me back to the relationship and seeing it now from an older perspective. What was the relationship between the two? What was going on behind the scenes? Was Tylee wanted the exception of my mom? Did my mom play on that? And I'm asking hypothetical questions in a sense, but also I'm wondering what this is going to do in this position in this case, because my mom bluntly told me in our interview, bluntly, right?
This is what I was talking about. And this is the evidence of Lori doing the worst scapegoating I've ever seen to her poor daughter.
She straight up was like, I'm doing all of this to protect Kylie's name. That was the whole reason she said she's even suffering and going through what she's going through is because she's protecting Tylee's name. But in the same breath, the first thing she told me is that Tylee came back after all the stuff that happened. Okay, after she's taken and everything of that nature, she comes back in spirit and apologizes for being a brat.
Okay, let me expand on that because I didn't talk about that. So, Lori, in the interview with Colby, like he just said, she says she opens the interview by saying that she had a dream where Tylee came to her in the dream and apologizes for what? For being a brat. The psychology of this is just so dark. that the woman would kill her daughter and then blame her daughter for both of her children's deaths. And of course, she's deceased. She has no way to defend herself. And then she goes on to to purportedly have a dream where Tylee comes to her apologizing, not apologizing for accidentally killing her brother, like Lori is trying to make people believe, which is not true. Um, but Lori is saying that Tylee came back to apologize for being a brat. So that tells me that in Lori's mind, Tylee was a brat. That's really sad. Um, mm,
For me, that conversation showed me everything about how Lori felt about her own daughter,
hmm
her own flesh and blood, is that she felt like she needed an apology after taking her life or whatever her part was played in there. She deserved an apology from Tylee herself. So that was her delusion, whether it was
mm.
whatever kind of visitation she was having, okay? Whether it's completely made up in her mind or she's seen stuff I don't couldn't tell you. No idea. The point being, Tylee was chasing her in the relationship.
Which probably inflated Lori's ego, made her feel like a good mom, like her daughter looked up to her, wanted to emulate her. Uh, she certainly exploits that desire of Tylee's to be loved, seen by her mom. Oh boy, it gets dark.
And now that she's gone, I can never know what was going on with her. And it the thing that always gets me back to this place of having to process the pain for me personally is that I feel for her in every way. And I feel for her the fact that she was a little girl basically. Okay. Barely had her feet on the ground, and if she did at all, and got put in this position by her own mother, by her own uncle, and who can handle that pressure?
I'm finding myself feeling not only really, really bad for Tylee, but also for Colby. I know from experience that you can have one parent who is multiple different parents to each child, especially when they're pathological, especially when they're intelligent. Um, Information guarding, uh, making sure to triangulate between the siblings, to drive wedges between the siblings. These are all tactics among many that parents like this will use so that there is a lack of communication between the siblings. Because if there's one sibling who's being scapegoated or mistreated or abused worse than the other siblings, for example, that parent's not going to want the siblings to talk, not going to want the siblings to expose things to each other and support each other or expose their parent. God forbid. So I imagine that Colby was kept out from knowing the majority of what their relationship was like. I mean, we'll keep listening and hopefully he'll say some more things about it. But um I know in my case, all those different types, religious abuse, spiritual abuse, medical abuse, parental alienation, just psychological abuse in general, all of this stuff was going on with me specifically and not my brothers. It was just me. And I never talked about it with my brothers, except one instance of religious abuse. I told one of my brothers. Beyond that, never. So for me to come out and say the truth, there is on their part a lack of belief. There's a lack of understanding, immense lack of understanding. So I wonder, everything that happened and the true dynamic of Tylee with her mom, I wonder just how many people were clued into that at all. I would venture to say that possibly Charles Vallow, possibly Tylee's stepdad could have been the most clued in if he suspected what was going on with the manipulation of Lori manipulating Tylee um, to reject Charles Vallow. We also have, not to sidebar too long, but we also have Lori. She's made all these allegations against Joe Ryan, who is Tylee and Colby's biological father. She made allegations of sexual abuse against him, and then what do you know? He goes ahead and he dies. He dies young. There's also evidence of, I know way too much about this case. Oh my gosh. But there's also evidence of Alex, Lori's brother, and Tylee's uncle claiming that he was going to end the life of Joe Ryan. And then Joe Ryan mysteriously dies. And even Colby, I've seen in the past, reject and hated his biological dad. And he believed, maybe he still does, I'm not sure. But in the past interviews I've seen, sorry, my hair keeps going in my face. In the past interviews I've seen of Colby, I know that he too endorsed those claims of sexual abuse against his biological father. Now, am I saying these are false allegations that never happened? No, I don't have enough information to say that. But when all these pieces start coming together, you just have to wonder. I'm just asking questions. I wonder how much of that is true. How much of what Lori ever told Colby, ever told Tylee, how much of that is true?
It takes me back to the moment when Kylie was willing at 2 years old to say, yes, we can drive off the cliff. You know, it makes me wonder of how she just wanted to be accepted and loved as everyone does. The thing is with that relationship is that my mom never gave that love. That love wasn't
Mm-hmm.
offered. We didn't have the type of love that you need. I think any kid would tell you, I'd rather live in a cardboard box with my parents and feel loved than live in a giant mansion and be empty. It's kind of an extreme example, but anybody would rather take a situation where they have their parents who love them and give them what they need
Mm-hmm.
versus materialistic things. And to be honest with you, I think that's how Tyler and I both kind of just grew up. Was we had a lot of things. We were blessed in that way, right? But she chased and craved what we all want is love. She wanted that acceptance.
Mm.
And
This is hitting home so hard. My parents, too, provided me with everything I needed. But the bigger the houses got, the more materialistic things they gave me, the worse their marriage got, and more toxic and more of a nightmare my life became. So I learned to associate wealth with corruption. And I do think that money corrupts a lot of people, but the point is this unconditional love, when you don't get that from your parent or parents, it leaves you unable to know the right type of love when it is right in front of you, if that makes sense. You're unfamiliar with how to express unconditional love for others. It might scare you, might feel unfamiliar. And when you do, if you do, hopefully you do, but if you do experience that down the line with someone else, you might not know what to do with it. It might not feel right because it's not familiar whatsoever. It might make you feel uncomfortable or maybe even bored. Because that type of love it is very secure, it is very stable. And if you've grown up in a very toxic family, you know that things are often unstable, things are often changing and unpredictable. So that becomes your familiar, that becomes your comfort.
It's bringing me back today is because my mom's already said these things about Tylee. She's already made a blank statement that she's going to protect Tylee at all costs now. So that is her mission. But Tylee was put in this position her whole life as being the difficult one, and whatever the case was by my mom, right? She
Oh, wow. Okay, so she definitely was. Sounds like she was the scapegoated child during her lifetime. I was too. It's not a coincidence that I was the only child targeted and alienated. Tylee, too, seems to be the child in their family who was targeted and alienated.
always got shrugged off, and they were always fighting and arguing and having this back and forth bickering. And at the end of the day, I didn't see that growing up. Like I didn't, not that I didn't see it. I didn't understand and see it like I do now. I didn't get it.
Mm.
I didn't realize the dynamic, right? I just thought they just had problems with each other because of whatever. You don't know until you're older. I didn't see it until I was out of the situation later on.
You know, Colby, I feel really bad for you, and I hope that you don't blame yourself for any of this, for missing signs or anything like that. I really hope that you don't blame yourself, or that you're learning not to blame yourself. Please, this is not your fault. What you just said, that you didn't know what was going on, you thought it was just a difficult mother-daughter relationship. Tylee probably, more than likely, didn't know what was going on either. There's a good chance she didn't know that she was being psychologically abused. There's a good chance that she didn't even know what was going on either. And all of this stuff is so covert. I'm sure that Lori purposefully hid the intricacies of that relationship from you, knowing you're a protective big brother. I just really hope that Colby doesn't hold anything against himself.
I started talking to Tylee and we started doing some type of therapy. Guess what? I was not a great therapist to her at that time because I thought that she and my mom needed to make amends. I thought they needed to like have a kumbaya moment and I wanted them to unite. And so I was trying to encourage her to try to listen to my mom. And that was on me. That was my bad. And that was something that I should have never said to her because I should have listened to what her feelings were. And I'm getting this all out now because I'd like to be able to have you guys understand that Tylee she just didn't have protection. She didn't have the love she needed. She didn't get any of those things. And she lived her life watching or having someone who's completely up and down in mood, running all over the place, moving you back and forth, and then basically just kind of giving you what you want, which as a kid, you're like, cool, like I can have this, I can get a car, whatever the case is. Like, that's cool. That doesn't ever make up for love. And the relationship now that I look at this whole thing is I'm praying on everything that Lori will eventually jump off that train of I did everything for Tylee. She went. Let's go over the good and the positive. Let's give.
Sorry, it's just that's exactly what my mom has always said too. I do everything for you. I'm the only person who cares about you. I'm the only person who loves you. I'm the only person who takes you to doctors and takes care of you, your health, and cares about you. Um, sorry guys, I need a minute. I feel so bad for these kids, all three of them.
Back and forth. My mom took care of us financially. She took us on fun trips. She was there. She supported, at least for me, she supported my dreams. When Tylee would come to her, I can think of the things that she tried to support her in with those things like getting art stuff or supporting her going out with her friends, this and that. But like Tylee and I have two separate lives, and I completely
That's what I was saying about the different siblings having different parents, but it's the same person. My brothers and I had a different mom. They were raised by someone that I was not raised by. So now to tell them what was happening behind closed doors, they don't believe me. They don't want to hear it. They don't watch my videos. They don't ask me questions. They've never approached the topic with me because to them, their mom would never do such a thing. And that's the scary part about these people. They really are able to compartmentalize relationships and they do it so that that person being that child being mistreated will stay in their little box so that no one is there to protect them. No one is there to intervene. And sadly, a lot of the time, it's effective. It sounds like for Lori and Tylee, it was effective. And there is nothing, in my opinion, that Colby as an older brother could have really done to intervene. I bet that if at the time, if Colby, and this is just speculation, just for devil's advocate, I bet that if Colby had noticed or asked Tylee something like, what is going on with you and mom? If he had pressed her harder, is something wrong? Is something happening? I bet she would have said no because I bet she didn't know exactly how she was being harmed because they don't teach you about psychological abuse being perpetrated by your own parents. They don't teach you these things in school. And Tylee wanting her mother's love and um, acceptance so badly, she was probably willing to accept any maltreatment, mistreatment, to feel a modicum of love. And let's remember, she didn't have another parent in the picture because Tylee manipulated her to outwardly and fully reject her stepdad, Charles Vallow. At least Colby had his stepdad, Charles Vallow, in the picture as somewhat of a loving, stable parent. Tylee didn't have that. In her head, Charles Vallow was probably way worse, way more of a monster, way more of a bad guy than her mom, Lori Vallow, who ended up murdering her. That that is how far this abuse can go. Because a lot of these parents on the severe level alienators, a lot of these people, they don't live in the world we live in. They are somewhere else entirely. Like Lori, wrapped up in her religious delusions, wrapped up in her delusions about Charles Vallow being this awful person, wrapped up in her delusions about Tylee being a brat.
didn't realize this till later. I was separated. I made myself from an early point. I was pulling out of my home life at like 15, 16. I
Same,
moved out at 17 years old and
same.
I just didn't realize I was out. You know what I mean? So she didn't have that. She didn't get a parent or someone who really gave her the
Yeah.
reaffirmation and the love that she needed in the home. And so, what do you do with that? Right? Like, where do you go when you're that young and you don't really know where you're supposed to go in life? You don't have a direction, you don't have a leader, and you just have to live in the chaos that is presented to you all the time. And I can understand that regardless of how angry you are at a parent or how mad you are at them for what they're doing, or no matter what, you want them to love you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, that was pretty
And
aggressive agreement, but that's the crux of the issue.
I don't think she ever got that.
I think that's a good place to stop the screen share. I think that this that Colby is actually has a lot of really important insights about his mom. It's incredible. And um I don't see any chats in the box. I was gonna head over and answer some chats in the live chat, but I just don't see any. Um hold on a second. Maybe it's not on. Is the live chat not on? Can someone leave a comment and let me know if the live chat is on? That's odd. Well, if it's not, I thank you for joining me. I can't do the whole video tonight. If you think that a part two or that more videos on this specific case would be helpful, if you'd like to see more of this specific case, please let me know. Otherwise, definitely go check out his channel. I will link it in the video description. Colby Ryan is his name, and he has a lot of profound things to say, especially on the topic of healing. And I'm just really in awe of his content. Honestly, I think his videos are amazing, applicable for anyone going through this situation or even a similar situation. Um, I definitely think it's worth checking out. So let me know in the comments what your take is on this. Do you think that my insights are accurate, or do you think that I missed something? If I did miss something, please let me know what your thoughts are. Um, and if you'd like more videos like this, let me know. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time and your support as always. I love this community. Thank you so much, guys. It's just been really empowering to spread the word about not only what this psychological child abuse is, but just how damaging it can be. And I think this is a prime example of just how damaging it can be. I'll see you next